Hi everyone, thank you for joining this Reinventing Yourself challenge session. I am Gill Whitty-Collins. I'm the author of Why Men Win at Work, and in my previous life I was a senior vice president at Procter & Gamble, working on global brands like Olay, Always, and Pantene. And I learned many really positive things in my 26 years at P&G. But I also learned some tough lessons about gender equality and diversity, and about the many barriers which are often subconscious and invisible, so difficult to get your hands on, that women face in their careers. And these barriers, can lead, and often do lead, to women leaving a company or an organization, or even in some cases to them giving up on their careers altogether. But I don't want to talk about that today. What I want to talk about today is the women who don't give up, the women who are strong and courageous, who realize that the workplace culture is not right for them, and they decide to walk away, and they decide to take their strengths and their talents and their brilliance and use them somewhere else to build their own company and business. And first and foremost, I want to say good for all of those women out there who have done that. And also, by the way, good for any person, whatever gender, who felt they didn't belong in a culture, who felt they weren't valued and leveraged there, and who walked away to something new. But what I want to talk about today is really that the gender equality and diversity grass on the outside of a company is not necessarily any greener than it was on the inside. And that's because the very same dynamics that created barriers in the company and organization you were in are still there when you leave it, because they're human dynamics. They're things that happen between all human beings wherever they are. And that's why, in the context of having your own business, we need to be very aware of these things, because it results in the reality that only 2 to 3% of all venture capital funding globally goes to women-led businesses, despite the fact, by the way, that those businesses are at least as successful in their delivery of results as companies that are led by men. So we all need to be very aware of these dynamics so that we can be ready for them, and so that we can handle them in the best possible way when we come across them. So let's talk about 5 of the key dynamics that I think we need to be aware of. Number 1, unconscious bias. Now, we all have this. We all have unconscious bias towards things and against things. From the moment we are born and conscious in this world, we're being fed information and images from the media and from news providers of men and women. And the reality is that we are predominantly seeing from the start men portrayed as leaders, lawyers, businessmen, and women were more often than not seen portrayed as mothers, housewives, or sex objects. So what that means is our brains, which do like to simplify this complex world, our brains are getting so many inputs a day, they have to simplify things, and they use stereotyping to simplify things and file them away. So when our brains see a woman, it is much easier to unconsciously file her very quickly in the mum bucket or the sexy bucket, rather than in the intelligent businesswoman bucket. And yes, I hate to say it, but the brain does simplistically see people as one or the other, not both at the same time, which, as we all know, is the reality. If we don't check it, it will simplistically stereotype and file this way. So whenever a woman walks into a room or a meeting, she faces this stereotyping and this categorization, even if people don't realize they're doing it. So she needs to be aware of it. Key dynamic number 2 is confidence. We're all drawn to confident people. It's normal. It's human. We like confidence in a person. The issue here is that for many, many reasons, many of which go back to childhood, men are generally more confident than women. They require less certainty in themselves, less certainty of information in order to feel confident, and therefore in order to project confidence. And we know that when somebody projects confidence, this gives us confidence in them. We cannot be confident in a person if we can feel that they're not confident in themselves, and vice versa. So we are much more likely to be confident in the strategy, in the plan of a confident person. And we're more likely, therefore, to invest in them or to want to work with them. So we as women need to be very, very cognizant of this confidence gap and on the impact that it has on the perception that people have of women, and thus on how they respond to our business plan, and thus the impact that it has ultimately on our business results. A third key dynamic linked to all of this is something I call giving good meeting in Why Men Win at Work. Again, this is something that men generally do better than women, and this is grounded again in their confidence. Men are generally more comfortable speaking more frequently in meetings. They're comfortable speaking at length and holding the floor for significant amounts of time. Meanwhile, while women often are struggling to get a word in, and by the way, they're often interrupted when they do start talking. And by the way, a loud, strong, testosterone-fueled voice also helps to be impressive in meetings, and obviously that's something the female sex cannot do a lot about. So as women, we need to be very aware of the importance of giving good meeting, and find our own authentic way to do that. We need some strategies, so we'll come back and talk about that. The fourth dynamic is something that is largely really underestimated by women and generally much, much better understood by men, and that's the importance of networking, visibility, and self-marketing. Most women that I have coached and mentored over the years believe that the thing that matters is the quality of their work, and that's really all. It's also known as the performance currency by some. Men, however, are a little bit more savvy, and they know that relationship currency is at least as important as performance currency. They know that people make decisions based on who they trust, and who they want to work with is based on a human connection. They know that people don't just need to know your work, they also need to know you, particularly if they're going to put significant amounts of money on the table and into your work. So this means that time invested in your visibility, your self-marketing, and your networking is absolutely crucial. Women do tend to believe that decisions are made based on the formal meetings and the formal pitches, and they generally do a phenomenal job preparing for those and making sure that they're absolutely perfect. Men know that decisions often really made before, after, or outside those informal interactions. One critically important fifth dynamic driving this as well is the time gap. We know that women take 80% or more of the responsibility for housework, preparing meals, looking after the kids, the unpaid work at home. And they take this responsibility even when they have a paid job or their own company on top. This was true BC, before COVID. It's even more true now. Women are taking on even more because there's more work to do in the home now. And what this means is that in totality, your average woman is doing about 20 hours more work than your average man because of this unpaid work. They also call it the second shift. Now, given we all, whatever gender we are, only get 24 hours a day, one rare area where we do have equality, this simply leaves women with less time for their paid work. And often what happens is they have to sacrifice something. And one of the first things that goes is sleep. The sleep gets sacrificed. We've got a huge number of women reporting insufficient sleep and stress and anxiety and even depression as a result. But also what is sacrificed, because as we've talked, women can believe that they can sacrifice this, is the time for networking, self-marketing, building those human relationships and connections that are so important when it comes to decisions being made about the business. So all of these 5 dynamics combine to make us perceive that men are more competent and more capable and better at their jobs and better at the work and more to be trusted than women. And that is a false perception, but it is a perception that's created by all of those things, and that leads to decisions. That leads to decisions about who to invest in, who to work with, who to hire. So we need to be hyper aware of them. These 5 key gender dynamics are everywhere, inside companies, outside companies, wherever you work, whatever kind of work you are doing. So now I want to give you 5 tips to manage this. Tip number 1, be aware. Please be aware. Please don't be naive about these barriers. If you are always alert to these things, you can be ready for them. You can be prepared to react in the right way when you encounter them. You can have strategies in your back pocket for them. Tip number 2, confidence counts. Confidence really counts. We all value it. So you need to find your confidence and you need to leverage it. So that sounds very easy, not so easy to do. How do you do it? I believe that everyone has what I call a confident core, even if that sometimes feel like it's buried very, very deep beneath a lack of confidence. I think of it like an apple. No matter how bruised the apple looks and is on the outside, its core is in there and its core is strong. So you need to find yours. You need to find it and you need to know it. And that means that you need to invest the time in yourself. Invest time to really think about yourself, go inside yourself, really think about your strengths and your talents, the things that you know you have them. You know you're brilliant at them. Nobody can take them away from you. These are the things that if somebody challenged you on these things, you would think, no, I'm not having that. This is something I know I'm good at. Those are your real core talents and strengths. That is your confident core. I am a massive fan of the Strengths Finder tool, which I use in coaching individuals and teams. It's a fantastic tool for really finding your strengths and talents, and then, by the way, knowing how to turn those into superpowers that you can really leverage to drive your success. So you need to, however you do it, know these strengths and talents. You need to own them and you need to speak from them, because this is your solid, confident core. And if you do this, you will feel confident. You won't be faking confidence. You will feel confident. You will project confidence because you feel it. You will project authentic confidence, and you will inspire confidence in others. Remember what we said. We are confident in confident people. Tip number 3, have a give good meeting strategy for your meetings, for your pitches, for those important moments, to make sure that you always do project your messages with confidence and do justice to your ideas and your proposals and your plans. This is very personal. It has to be right for you, but some thoughts are, one strategy can be, I will speak early, I will speak within the first 5 minutes, 10 minutes of the meeting. And this can help, because sometimes it can get quite daunting, quite overwhelming. If you've gone a long way into a meeting without your voice being heard, it starts to get even more scary to say something. The room hasn't heard your voice, it's not used to it, you're not used to hearing your voice in the room. So sometimes just saying something early can just give you that little confidence boost. Another strategy that I see people use, often see men use it very, very well, by the way, is using bullet point speak as you share your thoughts and plans. So I have 3 points, 1, 2, 3. This can really help you hold the floor and minimize those interruptions. It is even more rude to interrupt somebody who has said they're making 3 points when they're only just starting point 2. Now, having said that, it will help you hold the floor and minimize the interruptions, but it won't get rid of them altogether. You're always, sadly, that you'll always be interrupted. You'll always have your flow interrupted. So one other strategy is have a go-to phrase that you're going to use when you get interrupted and when the floor is being taken from you, or somebody's trying to take the floor from you earlier than you're ready for them to. Have something ready. One of my favorites is, let me just sum up and then I'll hand over to you. I really like that because it keeps control. You keep control. You kind of take that high ground of control. It's very, very polite, and it doesn't fall into that trap of sounding defensive, which can make you actually look less in control. And what you want to look is more in control. Lots of strategies for giving good meeting. Pick the right ones for you, but do think about this, because how you show up there is going to be important. It makes more of a difference than sometimes we give it credit for. Tip number 4, allocate time in your agenda for networking, for self-marketing, and for building those relationships, those human relationships with your partners, with your clients. Allocate that time just like you allocate time for meetings. Get into that discipline. You should be spending, ideally at least an hour a day, a minimum, at least some time a week on doing this. And please carve out the time. And tip number 5 is probably the most important. So I'm going to end with this tip. If you are in a relationship, if you're living with someone, ask yourself, is this a true 50-50 partnership in the home? Are we truly equally sharing the burden of the unpaid work, of housework, meals, kids, all of that stuff? And if you don't feel that you are, and the reality is most are not, you need to discuss it with your partner and you need to fix it. You need to not keep going with this. You cannot do all of the things well that you need to do to run a successful business if you are also COO of the home and doing 80% plus of the household work. So please think about tip number 5 first and foremost, because that will release so much time and capacity for you to do all of these other things well. So 5 key barriers, 5 top tips. I did want to end with just a few questions that people asked me in advance that I thought it may be interesting to touch on. First question. I have imposter syndrome. I've had it since I was a girl. It really affects my confidence. What is your advice? So, you're not alone is the first thing I will say. The world is full of people with imposter syndrome. My first piece of advice is reframe it and rename it, because I find this helpful. I actually call it perfectionist syndrome, because I think that's what it is. I think that's where it comes from. I think it comes from this belief that in order not to be an imposter, in order to be legitimate, I need to be perfect. And that isn't true. You don't need to be perfect in order to be legitimate. Legitimate is not perfect. The opposite of imposter is not perfect. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be good enough. You just need to be legitimate. And it's really important, this, because perfection doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. So anyone who is living under this shadow of imposter syndrome or perfectionist syndrome, waiting to be perfect before you feel confident, it's a road to nowhere, because perfection doesn't exist. And men, by the way, are much wiser about this. This is why they can be confident in themselves without feeling like they have absolutely everything perfect, because they know it doesn't exist. And they know that, they do their best, and that's virtually always good enough. This comes with absolutely accepting failure. So accepting that things will go wrong. By definition, things will go wrong. No successful person in the history of the planet, in any field, sport, business, science, wherever, got there without failing. Failing is something that happens. It's something that you learn from. It's something that makes you successful in the future. So really thinking about imposter syndrome as a road to nowhere, as the pursuit of perfection, which doesn't exist, as the avoidance of failure, which is essential to success. I think that can really help. And, I do always say, if there's one thing I could give to every young girl on the planet, it would be a perfectionist vaccine. I think it holds so many girls and women back from having the confidence to do things that they really should leap forward and do. Second question. I find self-marketing very, very difficult. I find it uncomfortable. I find it difficult. What is your advice? I think a lot of people do. And that's just a reality. I know, sometimes I'll look on LinkedIn and I see the way that people describe themselves, and it sounds so wow, and I think, my goodness, they're incredible. And then I'll actually look at, their experience and realize they don't have so much more than I have, but the way that they talk about themselves is absolutely brilliant self-marketing. So it's not just you who finds it difficult to do. It is difficult for some to big ourselves up. I still find that to this day after a 28-year career. My biggest advice on this is obviously go for it. Try and unleash. Try and talk about yourself in the most positive way you possibly can. Have a look. Have a look on LinkedIn. Have a look on websites at people who you consider to be your peers, people you consider to be your equals, people who you consider to be in a similar field to you with similar experience. See how they're talking about themselves, and let that give you the confidence to talk about yourself the same way. And also, and this is probably the biggest advice on this, ask a friend. Get a friend who loves you, appreciates you, knows your strengths and talents, and ideally somebody who's good with words. Get them to write about you. It's incredible how I have seen my CVs rewritten by people. Absolutely, it's me, and it's all absolutely true, but I personally could never have come up with those words. So this is can be a phone a friend situation, and you can do the same service in return for them. But do it, because being humble about your strengths and your talents and your experience is only going to hold you back. People do want to hear you writing and talking about yourself in that confident way. Hey, this is about being a brand. It's about selling. We sell our products. We need to sell ourselves too. So I hope those tips help. Last question. I am struggling to get investment. I put the work in. I do the preparation. But I always seem to lose out to someone else. And this question was from a woman. 2 thoughts, 3 thoughts. First thought, keep going, don't give up. Remember, failing is part of succeeding. We have to get used to no's and to no answers. And we have to have tough skin to that. Second thought, remember what I said about confidence. It may be that the confidence that you're projecting in yourself is not where it needs to be. And remember, if you project confidence, it inspires confidence. If you don't project confidence, it doesn't inspire confidence in you. If people are going to invest in you, they need to feel confident in you. They need to trust you. They need to smell that you really, really believe in yourself. So I would just go back to those thoughts of, how do you look inside yourself, find your confident core, find your strengths and talents, and talk from that place, because it will give you a genuine feeling of confidence that will show. And third thought for you on this is, there are a number of investment companies that passionately believe in women, and they passionately believe in the power of women-led businesses, and they believe that it's an untapped opportunity because those businesses are getting a very, very small share of the investment funding. So they actually see it as a real competitive edge to go after those companies. Find those. If you're a woman, find those companies, and you can contact me. I know some of them, because their start point is either that they are specifically looking for women-led companies, or some even only invest in women-led companies, and they're very, very aware of all of these gender dynamics that we've talked about, and they're very, very aware that behind these gender dynamics there are some incredibly brilliant and competent and talented women with some fantastic businesses, and they want to invest in them. So do seek them out. That will make it easier. Okay, so 5 dynamics, 5 tips, a few extra questions there. I want to thank you for joining this Reinventing Yourself challenge. I hope it will help you reinvent yourself in the context of the gender dynamics and barriers that are out there. Please do get in touch via my website, gillwhitty-collins.com, via LinkedIn, obviously, via Instagram. I'm a consultant, I'm a coach, I'm very much here to help people with all of these challenges and all of these opportunities. Thank you so much for joining. Take care.